Shall we move on to movie number 3? We're already in an hour.
Yes, let us.
All right. So the third movie we watched for this triple feature is Apartment 7A on Paramount Plus. This is a prequel to Rosemary's Baby. And I enjoyed this movie, but I will go ahead and say I am like 90% sure this got started because Natalia Erica James, who directed this and wrote the screenplay, basically stood up and said, I want to do a new adaptation of Rosemary's Baby. And all studio heads said, are you freaking insane? That's never going to happen. So she had to go back to the drawing board and said, okay, what if we make it a prequel? And they're like, okay, fine, you can do that.
Well, I am not one of those people who says that, you can't remake classics. I am of the opinion, though, that if that's what you're going to try to do
it for a reason.
You better bring something other than now I get to use CGI.
Exactly.
And Rosemary's Baby is one of those that I hate to phrase it this way because it's such a weird way to say it, but if that movie got made today, it would not have the reputation it has. There's a large chunk of Rosemary's Baby that is successful because of the time and place it was created.
Agreed.
And if you're going, and it's another one of those things where if you're going to try and remake something like that, you have to those are factors you have to understand and you have to keep in mind when you try to climb that mountain, because some of these are big mountains to climb. So going with a prequel conceptually is not actually a bad idea. And
why?
Because there's space within how Rosemary's Baby goes, that the notion that she was not the first one they attempted that with is not a bad thing. It's not an uninteresting idea to try and tackle. I think where this movie starts to fall down is the too much of it plays a bit too much like Rosemary's Baby. There's a bit too much beat for beat rather than iteration, rather than, okay, Rosemary's Baby was the success. If you're the pack of Satanists, that was the successful one. So where did they go wrong before? And unfortunately, this one just, I don't think it leans hard enough into ways they may have screwed up their plan. And consequently, it just plays a bit too much like Rosemary's Baby. And that's where it falls short, because now you're inviting direct comparison rather than talking about inspiration. Making a prequel that is inspired by, people will give you a lot of leeway. Like fans, critics, they'll give you plenty of rope there. But if you take that rope and all you do is doing beat for beat replays of the original, all you're doing is making a noose with the rope they've given you.
Except this time the good guys technically win because she walks off and it doesn't happen. Kills herself and it doesn't happen.
Yeah, walks off or walks off the window. So, well, okay, yeah. So those of you who are familiar with the original Rosemary's Baby, you remember a scene. You remember a character named Terry Ginofrio who is living with the what are these? Castavets. I want to make sure I got it right. Who in a later scene we see has fallen out of a window, and it's not made explicitly clear, but we're led to believe she killed herself. And as the movie goes on, we start to get a little hints of why she may have done that. This movie actually shows Terry, how she came to know the Castavets, how she became the unwitting pawn for this coven of Satan worshipers, and what led her to take her own life. It stars Julia Garner. Better get used to her, guys. This is the girl playing Silver Surfer in the Fantastic Four movie coming out.
That I'll get used to that about the same time I actually start caring about any of the casting Marvel does these days, because
hey, they're trying something new, and I'm excited to see them.
I am not up here saying that it is some kind of heresy to do a female Silver Surfer.
Well, there has been female Silver Surfers.
Yeah, so there's a higher order discussion to be had about, well, is it really that bright an idea to try and introduce an obscure iteration of a more notable character, or just the one everyone knows? You don't introduce, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, 600 years ago, 700 years ago, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, 1,000 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 ye Tim Drake's Robin, the first time Batman meets Robin, you go with Dick Grayson for a very specific reason. And hang on, it's not something that can't ever be circumvented. And that's why that's a different discussion. But my point
more on that argument, tune into the first episode of R&D right here on the W2M network.
When you should go with the most well-known version of a character you're introducing, or a secondary one when you have a lot of source material to draw from.
Absolutely. Okay. And actually, Robert, before we go any further, I want to have a very quick discussion with you about, because I really wanted your ideas on this, because after I saw the movie, I don't have your phone number, and it was like, Dark 30, but I was like, man, I really want to talk to him about this, but I was like, yeah, we're going to talk in the podcast. Talking about the situation of the prequel, it's being a prequel itself. And the reason I asked why was not to be pedantic. It was actually because I wanted your honest answer on this. I feel like there's some movies that deserve a prequel. I don't know how old you were when the original Star Wars came out, but that trilogy does.
That would have been before I was born.
Okay, cool. I don't want to assume and be like, oh, you're this young. You're like, oh, bless you, child.
Robert, David, and I are all the same age.
Gotcha. Okay, so using Star Wars as an example for a moment, the original trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6, we see and hear about Anakin Skywalker before he became Darth Vader. So episodes 1, 2, and 3, hate him or love him, or somewhere in the middle, there is an actual reason to have those questions answered. It's like, how did this person that was this, horrific villain who then redeemed himself become this in the first place? The question needs to be answered. In my opinion, and this is where I want the discussion with you, and this is the exact question I'm asking, with things like Apartment 7A or earlier this year's The First Omen, especially since it's horror and the scariest things are the things we don't know, why did this need to exist? Why did we need to know what happened to this character who is kind of just briefly talked about in the OG Rosemary's Baby film? Why do we need that?
Well, if you allow me to throw another example in there of times when this is not necessary and doesn't work very well, because...
I'm sorry, you guys go ahead. I'm just going to go start reading this.
Cool, knock yourself out. You're the host. That's your job. You're like, okay, these two fight, and I'm gonna catch up on reading.
But I mean, there was that version of The Thing that was all about the Norwegian.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel bad for that movie, having learned more about it.
Right.
More so that because, especially when the directors mentioned, like, yeah, I really wanted to do nothing but practical effects wherever possible, and the studio was like, man, this looks too 80s, and he kind of went, well, that's kind of the point. But instead they went CGI, and it's a big mess. But that's another one that's like, okay, something bad happened to those Norwegians. Do we need to see it? Because we know it's easy enough to infer that what happened there is basically what happened at the primary research station we follow.
Yeah.
So
completely
when it pertains to this one, I think the reason I'm more okay with this one is it doesn't actually answer all that many questions that you would find scary about the setting and the situation of Rosemary's Baby. There's not a big, like, okay, this is how they called up the demon. There's not a big, this is the demon's name, this is the demon's personality. There's a bit more shown of it than there was in the original because they have a bit more budget and they can play around with a little bit more of that. But it's still kept very there's still plenty of mystery there.
Yeah.
And to the question of need, I struggle to see the need for it, but it's the kind of space in the mythology and in the story where if the writer, director, if there are people out there who have the talent and have the burning desire, if something about it speaks to them that this needs to exist, that's the kind of space where I'll take the ride with you. I'll criticize it when I think it falls down, but this isn't trying to do a whole prequel about Han Solo's golden dice. This is something about this story and about this setting and everything spoke to a writer director, and they found a space within the story to play. This isn't Ridley Scott saying, "Here's where the aliens come from," and removing the mystery and the existential portion of why that is supposed to be horrifying. I will argue the xenomorphs are still scary, even knowing they're biologically engineered by Michael Fassbender, because they'll still rip your face off.
Right.
But there's an element of the horror that is lost when you explain that. This one it had a very difficult needle to thread, and to the point of the film, it doesn't very effectively. But in concept and in premise, the group trying to create the Antichrist, having failures before their success, I think if I were to try and pitch this, now again, this was not something that needled in the back of my brain forever about how I might do this, but spitballing here, I wouldn't take a character we knew. I would have gone back another 10 years.
I agree.
Set this in the 50s. Or like, late 50s, early 60s, because this is set in 65.
Yeah, like, and with what you're saying, like, kind of frame it in that idyllic, 50s picket fence style thing.
Well, we're still in New York, so 50s New York, but you can play with you can do the Mad Men kind of setup, right? You can do the 50s aesthetic. Play it there instead of, so have this be full of more failure. Like, I would have them making I would have the Coven making a bunch of slip ups. Like, I constantly not comedic levels of screwing up. We don't want to lean into this. Is Abbott and Costello meet Rosemary's Baby.
Sorry, you beat me for like 1 second. I'll be like, "Hey, I'm bad. I'll do not have the Antichrist, dude. Shut up."
Yeah, we don't quite want to go that far, but maybe have this be the first time the pregnancy takes, and have them be like, "Oh, well, now what? Like, we've tried and it's never worked, and honestly, I didn't expect to get this far. Oh boy."
It's like that Wile E. Coyote moment, one of the episodes where he actually finally catches the Roadrunner and he's got him, and then he holds up the sign and goes, "Okay, I've caught him. Now what do I do with him?"
Yeah, that's kind of how I would have played this one, instead of having it be so closely linked with Rosemary's Baby. But that's me, and that's the angle I might have approached with it. On the positive side for this movie, before we get into some of the negatives, costuming is all excellent, all appropriate, and the casting, bless the casting director for finding people who looked so much like the actors in the original, because that's what you're doing here. You're making 1-to-1 with these characters, so they have to look right.
They don't offer I would say we got for actual casting directing, but they should.
Yeah.
Just for this next year in 2025, it's like, and the new honorary Oscar for casting directing goes to this person because, damn, you kicked your own ass, and I hope you got paid really well for this.
I was going to say, give massive credit to Diane Wiest and Kevin McNally, who are playing the Castavets, replacing Ruth Gordon and City Black Mirror. They played the characters in the original. One of the things I didn't watch the whole
Diane Wiest in particular.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Voice.
One of the things I did after watching Apartment 7A was I didn't watch all of Rosemary's Baby, especially since I just found out my husband hasn't seen it, and I consider that, well, a sin. So I basically said, "Okay, no, not funny. We're watching this next week. You don't get to bitch. I'm making you watch this." But I pulled up the scene where
I assume the ending.
No, when Rosemary and Guy come across Terry's corpse. I think part of me just wanted to know how closely they got to that scene, and
almost shot for shot. Like, it is almost comical how well that's recreated. Like.
Yeah, but that scene ends with the Castavets. So now we find out they looked like they were coming home from something and they didn't know what had happened. Now we find out they did. But yeah, you hear Minnie and them talking, and it's like, oh my God. Diane Wiest has always been a phenomenal actress, no question. But I was just like, holy shit, she nailed how many sounded in the original. It was incredible.
And again, to Weist's credit, when she turns to be intimidating and menacing on a dime, and it's believable. And
that was actually the most terrifying thing of the entire movie was that, again, those moments when she would do that was like, Jesus.
The hair cutting scene when she goes from being I'm upbeat and it's you're staying right here, and she just kind of slowly you see it all
got
drop.
Everything you wanted. Why? Yeah, just like, oh my God, she really, that was
like, 2 fingers work.
It's a question of faith. Do you have faith in your fingers?
That scene when Terry threatens Julia's the actress. Terry tries to stab herself.
It's lower, dear.
Dear, baby, don't like that. Just, oh my God, she pulled that off so well. Kevin McNally, who also was amazing. I always forget how good he is, because the only thing I recognize him from was playing Gibbs in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but he really excelled.
That guy's he's one of those guys who's been around forever, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for him in the Pirates movies because it gave him more exposure. But he's been one of those guys you're just always happy to see pop up in any given project.
Well, he's one of those fantastic character actors that you know is working all the time and is like living comfortably, and he folds himself into roles so well that you'll fall into his characterization of a character, and it's not until he turns and does something you go, holy shit, it's Gibbs, fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, we also have Jim Sturgis. Glad to see he was able to salvage his career after Cloud Atlas.
Hey man, he was across the universe. He was fantastic, and that's his like credit cards. Like, hey, I was in that movie, and I sang really well and did really good. So you gotta let me, please.
But no, he's really good as this Broadway producer who is basically the one who gives the date rape drug to Terry. Can we talk about how well done the hallucination scene is when she essentially is brought down to the ceremony?
It's good, among them, but Robert, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. I talked a lot earlier. You're good.
It's done well, and I as a filmmaker, I salute it. It does feel in the same way like if I was Eric Clapton's son, or I was being trained by Eric Clapton, and the riff he does during his song Layla, and I came to him and was standing right next to him, and with my own guitar did the same riff, but I added 7 or 8 more notes to each chord. That's what it felt like, because it felt like the same hallucinatory scene from the original Rosemary's Baby when the devil is raping her. I apologize. Should have said trigger warning first to anyone just listening audio.
We've got the disclaimer at the front. You're generally okay.
Fair.
Yeah,
again,
folks, we're talking about a woman who is. Yeah, folks, we're talking about a woman who was drugged to create the Antichrist. So if there's something about sexual assault that is going to trigger you, we apologize in advance. You may want to tune out now.
But it's it just felt like someone was putting more notes into a riff that already worked. Which again, as a prequel, I guess is fine, but visually, again, as a creator, I'm like, man, that's awesome. I know how you did that. I know how that trick worked. That's fantastic. But I was going, the OG one did it better, and it scared me more.
I'm more willing to go along with this one for a couple of reasons. The big one being this is how that character is reacting to it versus how Rosemary is reacting to it. And this is also, and this is just one of those things that you can't get around when you're talking about something in this, when you're inviting these kind of comparisons. No disrespect to the lead actress here, but you ain't the original Rosemary, and that's not a hurdle almost anyone is going to clear. So it's not like that's some damning indictment. But her character reacting to it that way, again, I'm more okay with that going along with it. This iteration of that sequence, I would bet you money that there are people out there who find this one more scary than the one from the original. And I think that's largely going to come down to preference and what kind of visual style triggers that kind of fear response.
There was a cut scene, by the way, that ties directly into this. She is a dancer who was trying to get, discovered and stuff like that. There was supposed to be a scene where she was taken advantage of in a kind of casting couch situation. And apparently it was argued over and over again in pre-production and filming. And they were like, listen, man, after the Weinstein stuff, after the Cosby stuff, I get where you're coming from, but we just can't. I think I'm, going back to the whole school bus with the,
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of err with the producer on that one, believe it or not. I can understand the creative impulse for it, and it actually would create an interesting
juxtaposition and dynamic.
Well, not only that, but, and I really hate to phrase it this way because it's more than a little bit gross, but since that's kind of the direction this would have gone, it does create a bit of a, well, wait, who's the father thing that you could have played off of for a bit of the movie before the supernatural stuff really kicks in.
I was going to say that's what I preferred about this is that they're trying to play it up that Alan, that's Jim Sturgis's character, is the one who slept with her. He says like, I had such a great time with you last night the next day, and he's in his robe. So yeah, we're led to believe that she just couldn't hold her liquor and they slept together. And I do like how the dream sequence, you see him dancing with her, you see him holding her, and he's wearing the tux. In her mind, Alan is the one that's doing all of this. And I like, again, we know because we've all seen Rosemary's Baby and we know where this is going. We know the truth, but we could see it from her perspective. She's essentially putting two and two together. She's like, something's going on. I feel like someone is being with me. Well, what could it be? Could it be the man that I was just flirting with who was helping me because I fainted from the drinks? Or is it Satan?
Yeah. I think where this movie really kind of falls down, and this is the brilliance of the original, by the way, that this one just fails to live up to. The original has this wonderful growing tension throughout the whole thing that you're never quite sure what angle it's going to go, whether she is just getting a little bit more paranoid, whether do you really see what you think you saw. And a lot of the freaky stuff is in the style of most 70s horror movies. It's fairly quick, and it's I don't mean fully in the background, but it's not foreground material. This movie tries to follow that. Unfortunately, there's a real, I don't mean to be insulting to the filmmaker when I say the following. That is a skill to keep that kind of tension building throughout a film is a skill that is not present here. And when you're trying to make a movie that is predicated upon, you're going to fall down. And that's where this movie falls down.
Well, and also remember that, again, the director herself may have had, again, with the scene I talked about being cut, may have had directions she wanted to go, and the producers and executives were like, no, we want to do this. Remember how, again, not hate to, but referencing another YouTube channel, Mr. Ryan George, who does pitch meetings. There's several times he'll make a joke of like, I'll use the Fantastic Beasts movie, Secrets of Dumbledore. It's like, so we're going to get to see Hogwarts? Yes, sir, we are. Put McGonagall there. Well, where this is set, sir, she's not born for another 8 years. Put McGonagall there. Everyone loves McGonagall. Yeah, but what you're not understanding, sir, is she's not born for another 8 years. Put McGonagall in there. That same situation may, in a different way may have happened here.